Welcome to First Ones to Die, Episode 2, starring Bones and All by Camille DeAngelis and Bones and All, the 2022 film, directed by Luca Guadagnino. Guadagnino. Oh, is that N silent?
And then David.
Written by David You know what? I love unique names. I love them and I respect them. And I am so sorry. I don't know how to say these people's names.
I think it's Kajganich.
Kajganich? DeAngelis was also tripping me up when I first saw her last name. I'm just bad. And it's, you know what? I always feel like a bad, unique last name haver. Because my last name also trips every single person up. My phone just vibrated, so that probably showed up on this. Whoops! It's a mess today. I'm gonna turn that on silent. Shut up, Tyler. I'm Tierney. I'm here to butcher everyone's last name, even though my last name is butchered constantly. No solidarity, sorry.
And I'm Wolfgang.
Yes, Wolfgang is also here. And Lucy is also here, and she's snoring. So if you hear any adorable puppy snores, that's her contribution.
That's her thoughts.
Okay, so Bones and All. Thoughts?
This is our first investigative episode. We both watched the movie first, and then we read the book, and we both really loved both. And it's a really good story in both cases, and it's also really fascinating to see the differences in how the creative teams tackled the story in different ways. So before we get into any kind of spoiler, we both very highly recommend watching the movie, reading the book.
Yes, big time.
Yeah. So if you haven't done either of those, stop listening to us and go do that.
Go do that.
So all right, so let's do our spoiler-free kind of summary and recommendation. Mm-hmm. Both the movie and book are about a young woman named Marin who is abandoned by her single parent. And so she, due to the fact that she has a compulsion to eat people, and it's resulted in them moving constantly. And so finally one day Marin is abandoned by her parent. In the book it is her mother, in the movie it is her father. And so she goes off in search of her other parent who presumably might be an eater like her. And along the way she meets
other eaters. And finds herself. It's a coming of age story / romance. Hence the Valentine's Day airing of this episode. Lee, who is her main romantic love interest, is also an eater. He is also on a journey to find himself in a way, and they end up finding themselves through each other.
Because that's what love is.
That's what love is. Okay, so that's the spoiler-free recap review. After that, we're going to be talking about everything that happens. So
You've been warned.
Book first.
All right, getting right into it. Well, let's talk about the differences.
Sure, let's talk about the differences.
So, as I mentioned, in the book, it is Marin's mother who is the one who raises her. In the movie, it is her father. And in the book, Marin's mother abandons her the day after her 16th birthday. In the movie, Marin's father waits until her 18th.
That's right. So the book is much more of a young adult story. It is geared towards a teenage audience. And so it has, a little bit more of an adolescent feel to it. It's still enjoyable no matter your age because, well done stories transcend ages. But it is very much a YA novel. While it is horror, it's kind of like softball horror.
Horror in spite of itself.
Yeah, it's sort of softball horror. It's an underhanded pitch, On the horror YA spectrum, it's definitely more Twilight than anything by Anne Rice.
Yes.
Which I don't know if Anne Rice writes YA, but I definitely read it as YA, so...
As a YA.
Spiritually, it feels YA. But, okay, so do you want to just get into the whole veganism topic?
Okay, so starting off, in order to talk about this, we've read the book, we've watched the movie, we also watched a YouTube series by Camille DeAngelis, the author of the book, where she talks about her inspirations, thought processes behind it, her reactions to the movie, and it was really nice.
It was really great.
She really loved the movie.
She seems like a very lovely person as well. Obviously, we do not know this woman. Let me just say that. I don't know this woman. But she seems very lovely. she seems like a very kind, generous woman.
And in talking about the differences, she was very upfront about the fact that she wrote Bones and All a decade ago, and that for her as an author, her writing process, when she gives herself about 1.5 to 2 years for a book, and then she's done, she moves on. And so,
which is smart. Let me just say that. That's how you finish things. She's a finisher.
And she really loves the movie, and she felt like David Kajganich really kind of made it more. And, not to discredit herself, but those are kind of her thoughts around it. And in this series, she talks about, like, well, what's the book actually about? And she says that, there's been lots of people guessing online, but for her, as she wrote it, it's about veganism specifically.
It is about veganism.
And the self-loathing journey she went through before becoming vegan. And that was a bit of a surprise to us.
It was a huge ass curveball. Huge.
Because I don't know that...
Lucy also thinks it was a huge curveball.
Because I don't know that doesn't really come across.
It doesn't come across at all. We can be honest. A lovely woman. I liked the book. I don't think that this book had the intended effect.
Yeah, because as we've talked about, at the very end of the novel, Marin accepts who she is.
That is the entire ending.
And she kind of accepts that this is who she are, and she's like actively hunting her victim.
Right. She has come to terms with the fact that she is an eater. She has to kill and eat people to survive. And she becomes an active participant rather than just letting it kind of control her at the whims of, her compulsion. And that's a great ending. I love the ending. Why is that the ending if your intention is to talk about how taking a life to eat is not great?
And also because in the book, to go back to the differences, in the book, Marin doesn't have really control over it. It's something that happens to her due to a specific circumstance, and every eater is different. They have a different set of circumstances where it just happens. It's like something like she goes outside of herself.
She has a trigger.
In the movie, it's very different because they have this, it's like a separate kind of hunger where Marin feels genuinely hungry, where like she has to satisfy it, and that's how it is for the other eaters as well. And so to have that for the book where it's something that triggers in her, it's not something she controls, it's not something she even feels.
Yeah.
Really, until it happens.
In the book, the act of eating is very much kind of a fugue state. She's not present for it.
So it's just very odd that if it's supposed to be about, because Marin isn't taking lives to sustain herself, presumably if she were to isolate herself, she could go years without eating someone.
It just doesn't really click as an allegory for animal consumption. And to be clear, I have nothing against veganism. I'm practically vegan, but I've read books that are allegories for the unethical consumption of animals. Tender is the Flesh.
Yes, let's just say,
huge recommend.
If you want to read something that sort of handles that and does it well by a vegan woman,
yes,
Tender is the Flesh is the book to read, and that's all we'll say about that.
Yes. Moving on, though, going back to, in the book, this compulsion to eat is triggered by a specific thing for each eater. It's different for each eater, and it starts for each of them in early childhood. And with Marin specifically, it's triggered by when somebody desires her. If somebody has romantic or sexual desire for her, that switch is flipped and she has to eat them. And she does. So, in a few cases, it's not reciprocated by Marin. There is an assault scene. I also think in one of the early ones, there's a little boy who sort of demands that she take off her clothes after he takes off his.
That's her second time.
And
her third.
Yes, and she is clearly uncomfortable.
It's actually very funny because they're 10, and so...
Yeah, they're little kids.
They are. And it's the, the sort of beginnings of this kind of sexual curiosity, desire. And she's at a house party that his family's hosting. Work function. She followed her mother there. And he takes her into the basement, and he's just like, all right, I'll show you mine, and you show me yours. And he pulls down his pants and pulls them up, and he says, okay, your turn. And Marin says, I never said I was going to do it.
Yeah, Marin clearly doesn't really want to.
And he just goes, aw.
Yeah, it's not the same as the assault scene later in the book, but it is very clearly not reciprocated. It is sort of uncomfortable.
Which is different from her second victim, which was Luke.
Who she was genuinely close to and liked.
They were 8. She was at a summer camp, and this is the very beginnings of kind of sexual desire, where they're going to share a puppy
a little kid kiss. Yeah.
And Marin does really like him and does clearly wish that she was someone else, so this could be oh, if I was anyone else, this would be my childhood sweetheart.
Right.
And instead she eats him.
So we've got a clear case of she does it whether she likes them back or not.
Yeah.
And we were discussing this earlier, but Marin's first kill was when she was a baby. She was 3 or so, 2 or 3.
2 or 3.
Yeah, she was toddler age. She doesn't remember it, and it was a babysitter. And we do not believe this was authorial intent, because the author has not mentioned this at all. She didn't say that this was on purpose, but you really can't help, while you're reading and putting the pieces together on the map, wondering what did that babysitter do?
Because if you follow the logic that's set out before you, because later in the book, Marin meets Travis, who is a gay man who is suicidal, and he wants Marin to eat him because he's tired of living, and Marin can't do it, and she knows that it's never going to happen.
She can't do it because he doesn't desire her.
Yes.
And he does desire her in a way, in the sense of he wants human connection, he wants something from her. So if it was any kind of desire, period, then she would presumably be able to eat him.
And he even is he's very kind to her. I think he has a very genuine worry for her safety, and he feels this kind of closeness to her because he's so close. He's basically her father's only friend.
Right. So
it's clearly a sexual desire.
Exactly. It has to be sexual / romantic, because I don't really think, little boy Luke had sexual desire on the mind.
But that's what I mean when I say it's when you first are discovering it and it's only a kiss. That's the first kind of stirring.
But either way, it has to fall into that. And so if her first victim was this babysitter when she was too young to remember, that says something.
Yeah.
Whether you really want it to or not. And for me, that reads as very much a message of how trauma, even if it's not remembered, affects the brain for the rest of your life. Because this continues for the rest of Marin's life. And it affects her ability to have relationships with other people. Childhood sexual abuse, it is carried lifelong. And that kind of becomes the unintended message.
Yeah.
And you also have to wonder then about Lee, because his victims are abusers / bullies, people that he believes
are bad people,
and that the world is better off without.
He even mentions that his first was a babysitter, but he was a little older, and he remembers that she was very cool.
Exactly.
She would physically hurt him, but in ways that were explainable.
Exactly. So again, that ties back to Marin's babysitter. What happened? I really like that reading of this story. I mean, obviously it's very dark, it's very tragic, horrible, but
it makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and it means something.
Yeah.
If you've experienced anything like that, reading something like this can feel very reflective. It just resonates with you.
And I think that it makes sense, though, that Marin maybe wouldn't, she doesn't remember it, and her only recollection with Penny is what her mother has said, and her mother carries all this kind of guilt over it.
Yeah.
And she says that, the one thing she really remembers about Penny was how excited she was to be asked to babysit Marin, which you can interpret that a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And even from her perspective, where I kind of like where she, as this 16-year-old girl, she kind of doesn't differentiate in how she feels guilty between the men that desire her when she doesn't reciprocate, and the ones that
deserve it and the ones that don't.
Right. So
quite frankly,
in the book, one of her victims is named Andy. She is on her journey. She's wound up at a Walmart. She's clearly starving, and she goes to steal a can of beans. And Andy is a worker there who sees her, kind of takes pity on her, brings her some food, and they sit in his car. And I really like this scene because as he's talking to her, he's this college student. He's run away from home because it was terrible. And you really really feel for him because I've been there. Like, he's working this terrible dead-end job. He's taking whatever classes he can, trying to be better, and it's just hard. And as he's talking, Marin can tell that he wants her, and she's trying to be like, no, I'm not going home with you. I'm gonna leave. And he won't take no. And he starts putting his hand on her leg and getting closer, leading in for a kiss, and then she devours him. That's very clearly an assault scene, and the author intended it as an assault scene. But Marin doesn't see it that way. She sees it as like, oh, he was so nice. He brought me food.
He brought me food, and I did this to him in
yes.
thanks. Marin is an unreliable narrator. I mean, she starts out that way because she doesn't have all the facts. Yeah. And then she continues that way because she has a guilt complex. And she is just sort of still in denial about what she is.
Until the very end.
Right.
And again, I think that does support the theory that her babysitter was abusing her. Mm-hmm. And also, her father, who is in the book, is the eater, is the one who passed on this genetic thing to her. His first memory is eating a man when he was 6 who tried to assault him. Mm-hmm. And much like Lee, his trigger is people who are bad, who are cruel. Mm-hmm. And that's what ends up driving away Janelle, Marin's mother, because he ends up eating one of their friends when he finds out that they are awful and cruel.
Yeah. Another big difference between the book and the movie are the parents.
Yes.
Marin's parents. In the book, it's her mom who is really raising her out of a sense of obligation.
The sense that you're my responsibility.
Right. Her mom, you do get the sense that Marin doesn't really feel loved by her mother. She feels more like a monster, even though her mother never calls her that. And in the movie, Marin is raised by her father, who is still scared of her, but he clearly has love for her. He clearly loves her in spite of her condition.
But he doesn't know what else to do. A big indicator of that is when both parents describe to Marin finding her next to Penny's body. And in the book, Janelle says that she basically fished out Penny's eardrum from her mouth and knew that, like, oh God, Marin did this. And in the movie, her father says that he fished something out of her mouth and it was an ear with a hole in it for an earring. And he says, thank God she wasn't wearing any because you could have choked.
Right. His first thought is
still for
Marin's safety.
And this is repeated again when she meets her grandparents on the eater parents' side, where in the book, her father, both in the book and movie, both her mother and father, eaters, were adopted. But in the book, her father was adopted by a couple who had lost a son at 3. Mm-hmm. And it very clearly, he grew up basically never being good.
He was the replacement baby.
That they resented.
Yeah.
But they felt obligated to raise because, well, they had adopted him.
Right.
And in the movie, Janelle, her mother as an eater, was adopted by the couple, but they couldn't have babies on their own. And Janelle was dropped off at a fire station. And again, when her grandmother says, you know, we don't know what her parents, anything about them except what they did to their baby. Like, how could they just leave her there? It's cold all the time. She could have froze to death, even though it's very clear that there's a very tense relationship between Janelle.
Well, there's not really a relationship, period.
Yeah.
They're very estranged by that point. And the grandmother doesn't really want a relationship with her. She doesn't want a relationship with her granddaughter either. But there is still that kind of inherent quality of a parent talking about their child, and their first instinct is their child's safety.
Yeah, and even in the book, after the summer camp incident where Marin eats Luke, she refuses to eat anything because this is the first time that she's ever remembered doing it. She refuses to eat anything. She ends up at the hospital, and a woman from social services ends up talking to her mother, Janelle. And her mother comes in and says, would you please just eat whatever they give you? You were this close to going into foster care. And for Marin, she sees that as like, oh, you know, my mother really does love me because I could have been someone else's problem. But in reality, it feels more like Janelle would have felt more guilty because she's like, okay, I know what she is. I can handle this.
Yeah, I can't let her loose into this population.
It doesn't feel like an act of love the way that Marin interprets it.
Yeah, it's an act of obligation and also resignation.
Yeah.
This is the hand that Janelle has been dealt. She'll play it for as long as she can, but she doesn't want to.
And even in the letter where she says, I love you, but I can't do this anymore, like, I don't think she really did love her.
No, I don't either.
It's again, it's an obligation to tell her, like...
And also at 16, there's such a difference
yeah.
in abandoning your child at 16 versus abandoning your child at 18. I know it's only 2 years, but that makes a difference.
Yeah. And also in the movie, her father leaves her a cassette tape. And he tells her about all the times that he's remembered her eating someone, because in the movie, Marin doesn't really remember things. It's like, again, to go with the, this is different than in the book, but like the idea of it being like trauma, that she just kind of blocks it out.
Right.
And at the end of it, he says, I don't think that I loved you the way that a father should, but I also can't do what someone else might do. I can't just turn you into the police. Like, I don't know how to help you, so I've got to leave you to figure it out on your own, but I really do pray that one day you'll wake up and have normal problems.
Right.
Which, that's more than Janelle in the book ever does.
Yeah. Another huge difference, Sully.
Huge difference. Trauma.
Huge difference. So in the book, Sully is Marin's grandfather.
Paternal grandfather.
Paternal grandfather. Her biological father was his biological son, who he planned to eat.
Yep.
But people swooped in, saved him. Sully couldn't eat him. Sully was mad about that. And fast forward a generation, Marin now exists. Sully finds her, doesn't tell her that he's her grandfather.
That he's figured it out.
Yeah. Their first meeting is sort of similar to the one in the movies, except she doesn't not trust him. She does like him in the book. She kind of latches on a little bit because he's the first eater.
And he has this kind of charisma.
Yeah, he's much smoother. He's not as awkward and weird. And later on you find out, and Marin finds out, that he is her grandfather, and his little eater trick is eating his family members.
Well, I think because he eats Travis, I think for him, he just likes hunting.
He likes hunting, but he does have a weird thing about his family, though. Like, he's eaten multiple family members.
He does. And for him, he says his first time was eating his grandfather when he was dead. And that, at that time, this however long ago, you would have like a wake, so the body was left out. And he said that he was this little kid, and so his mom found him, cleaned him up, and didn't say anything. And so the rest of his family, in the book, there's nothing left. In the movie...
Yeah, that's another difference. The book is named Bones and All because the eaters eat the bodies, bones and all.
There's almost nothing
There's almost nothing left. Usually the only thing left are their clothes and shoes, which they just throw out.
Yeah. And he said that caused some kind of wonder, and he said his aunt basically thought that, maybe her dad wasn't dead and came knocking on all the neighbors' doors hoping that her dad was...
Which is so interesting. I mean, I understand grief does strange things. It makes you think strange things. But what was the thought? Your dad just woke up and stripped off all his clothes and went wandering through town?
Well, if it's better than him being dead, then
yeah, for sure. But he eats family members. That's a whole thing for him. And also, yes, he ate Travis, but Travis was connected to his son and also to Marin a little bit. I think there's something there as well.
No, I totally agree with you, but I think that as a larger part, because he also eats Mrs. Harmon in the book,
who was nice to Marin.
Sure. Okay, so you think that like it's solely just...
I think because that's a whole facet of the book is they each have a specific thing that they eat. They don't really go beyond that.
I also thought that like he also just likes other eaters, because when we meet him, and this is also in the...
That's true.
That he's missing like part of a finger, he's missing part of his ear, and I think for him, he likes going after other eaters, and for him, going after family is a special treat.
Okay.
That's a personal satisfaction.
Yeah, but yes, he plans to eat Marin.
But he's a cat. He likes playing with his food. So he doesn't actually stick around. He leaves out before her at Mrs. Harmon's house and leaves her a note saying, well, I know you're hell-bent on it, so I'll leave you to it.
Right. He's biding his time.
And I think it also, he just wants to see, like, will she figure it out?
Right. Sully in the book... Jesus, Lucy. Sully in the book, I think, is more malicious.
Oh, for sure.
He is more of a villain. He's more malicious. He thinks about things. He is an active threat.
And... to go to, in the book, there's a lot more where Marin talks about, like, fairy tale monsters. Like, she, she's collected in her journal, photocopied and pasted in all kinds of...
Saturn devouring his son.
Which comes up a lot.
Which is a fantastic motif. I love it.
And also just...
I wish that was the book cover. I'll be honest.
That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other stories of cannibals and just kind of like this understanding. And in the book, it is kind of a fairy tale, like, oh, and then they're just gone. And it's really interesting because when you have creatures of these cannibals and extreme hungers across cultures, a lot of times they're very gaunt. They're the embodiments of starvation. And Sully in the book is described as being gaunt, creature of starvation.
Very
He's
emaciated.
eternally hungry, even though Marin sees him eat and eat and eat and eat, like regular food too. It never stays on him.
The hole can't be filled.
Yep. And another thing that Rick keeps repeating a lot, that comes up a couple times, is the kind of references to Hansel and Gretel, which I love, because at the end of Hansel and Gretel, it's revealed that the witch was actually their stepmother. They were moving from a house of familial abuse to another house of familial abuse.
Right.
And so the reveal at the end that going to this cabin, and it turns out that, oh no, it actually was her grandfather all along. It was her family.
Yeah, it's a cycle. And I love cycles. I do. So that's the book. The ending is different as well. Lee dies earlier in the book than he does in the movie.
Yeah. And that's because the book and movie, this is where they really deviate thematically, where in the book, Lee is more, I don't know, he's more of a catalyst for Marin. You know, he's symbolic for Marin on her journey.
Yeah.
Whereas in the movie,
Lee is very much his own character.
it's a romance between them.
It's a dance. And in the book, Marin does eat Lee, but Lee is not dying.
Yeah.
He does let her eat him. He chooses to let it happen. She's actually begging him not to. They're in bed together, they fall asleep together, and does he kiss her or just move to kiss her?
You know what? Give me just a second. Let me grab a copy of the book.
I mean, you don't have to. It's not really that important. But either way, he is clearly in love with her. She's also in love with him by this point, and she knows what will happen if he doesn't stop. And he knows what will happen if he doesn't stop. He knows this about her, but he lets it happen because he loves her. And they fall asleep, and Marin wakes up with the taste in her mouth. She calls it the bad taste. And that's how she knows that she has eaten someone. And Lee is gone. So she eats Lee. He very much lets her eat him because he knows what happens if he does this, and he does it anyway. He's sort of resigned to it because he's in love with her. And it's very tragic. It's very devastating, but it is very different from the movie in which Lee is literally dying and just begs Marin to eat him rather than trying to get him medical help.
And in a way, like, he knows he's not getting medical help. He knows he's not going to survive it. Kind of as this final act of love.
Yes, it is very much a consumption as an act of love situation. And she eats him. And I like to think that she ate him bones and all.
I think that it is. I think that that's the point. Another difference between the two is that there's a scene in the movie that is not in the book, which is that on the road trip, Marin and Lee run into an eater and his groupie friend.
Who is not an eater, but is a cannibal.
Yes, and as they sit and have this campfire...
And he's a cop, which, whether or not that was intended, hello.
Absolutely it was intended. The eater, who's named Jake, and his friend Brad, they come up to them, and there's this immediate familiarity where they're just like, hey, we smelled you. You were up one of us. Do you understand what I mean? It's like, hey, we brought some beers. Like, let's hang out. And Jake starts telling them about how he and Brad met, where Brad catches him when he's caught a victim and is eating them, and Brad decides that he wants to try some, and Jake lets him, and after that they're kind of traveling together. And this really disgusts Marin and Lee because...
Lee plays it off, though. Yes. Because Lee is a survivor. Lee knows that this is a dangerous situation. This is another eater who is healthy. He is strong. He has another healthy, strong, bigger guy helping him. Both Lee and Marin are pretty small.
Lee himself in the movie says, when you're 140 pounds wet, you have to have a big attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they're very small. Marin, they're pretty malnourished. They are not going to be winning this fight. And so he plays it off really well. And you can tell that he's acting, but he's laughing at their jokes. He realizes that he has to be buddy-buddy with these kinds of guys because if they snap, he and Marin are in danger. Marin, who has not been surviving in this world for very long.
She's new at this.
She is new at this. She does not know to play this off. She is very much like, you disgust me. This is disturbing. Fuck you guys.
And it's really funny then that after she kind of storms off, that Jake, the groupie, he's just like, oh, she's lucky she has you to help show her around.
Right. Automatically kind of putting him and his eater BFF in the same roles as Marin and Lee, despite the fact that they are not similar at all.
Completely different.
Also, Brad is played by director David Gordon Green, known for the recent Halloween trilogy, which is just very funny.
And he's really good.
He's good at it, yeah. I kind of wish he had been acting instead of directing, because those Halloween movies.
It makes me wonder, like, if he didn't have Jake with him, would they have, like, trusted him?
I don't
Probably
think
not.
so.
But
first of all, he's a cop. Marin and oh, you mean the Eater?
Yeah.
Oh, no, still probably not.
Still probably not, but he has this sort of familiarity with them, this easiness. I wonder if, like, they wouldn't have tried to. Well, they probably would have snuck away.
No, they probably would have stuck away. Because I think Marin for sure wouldn't have trusted him and would have tried to sneak away, because she did that to Sully, and I think she liked Sully better than this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the book. And then it ends with Marin on her own, living her best life as a college student. And
I don't think she's a proper student. She just works at the library.
Well, she's faking being a college student, though.
Oh, okay.
Got a little apartment, and it ends with her purposefully seducing some boy with the intent to eat. She has come to terms.
And she isn't just, like, letting it happen, like, being kind of disinterested.
No, she's purposefully doing it.
She is. Like, she wears all black because it doesn't show the mess, which she points out. And she gets dressed at one point, and she specifically picks out clothes because she says, I think that Jason would like a look at my legs.
Yeah, Marin is going full femme fatale Black Widow.
Which is also why it makes it confusing that, like, if this is
about veganism.
It
is. It's confusing. I don't really get that. But, you know, that was her intent, and I respect that was her intent. I don't think it worked, but I liked the book.
Yeah.
Now on to the movie, which is a masterpiece. I liked the book. I did. I think the movie is a masterpiece.
I agree.
The movie is such a work of art. Almost every difference, I think, enhances the story.
Yep.
I do wish that they had kept the fact that each eater has their own particular motivation.
Right, that it's not just a general hunger.
Yeah, because I just found that interesting. They don't keep that. The eater's just gonna eat.
They're just like this.
And that's fine too.
But I think it does add a kind of pressure to it where, like we said, if you have a specific trigger, you could avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
You could isolate and avoid it. With the movie,
they can't. There's no avoiding it. There's no possibility of that, because they need to do it to survive. And that's true. Wolfgang just finished a granny square blanket?
No,
what do you call it?
It's finger loop yarn that I bought almost 4 years ago at the beginning of lockdowns. And I still have to do, like, a border and stuff on it, but
whatever, it's finished mostly.
You know, actually, before we move on to the movie, talking about knitting.
Oh yeah, knitting, that's true. Knitting has a big role in the book, which Wolfgang loved because he is a huge knitter. Knitting has a huge role in Wolfgang.
But I like that it's very, and it turns out that Miss DeAngelis is a knitter in real life, which makes perfect sense to me. And it's not just kind of an idle detail, it's done specifically thematically, where throughout the book, Marin is, until the end, until she eats Lee, she is clinging to the idea of a normal life. She fantasizes on the way to meet her father that he's going to be normal. He's going to make her breakfast in the morning. They're going to go to restaurants. And even when she realizes that that's not going to happen, she still is kind of clinging to it. And she even fantasizes about having a life with Lee, even though as she imagines it, she knows it's not going to happen. And along with this, Mrs. Harmon, who is a very kind older lady who helped her out when she was first struggling, offers to give her knitting lessons specifically. Later, she finds a crochet hook and tries that too. And so even after Mrs. Harmon dies before giving her this lesson, she carries around the yarn and the needles, and she struggles to try and cast on. Because there's a little pamphlet there, the little, teach yourself to knit, which if you've never tried to teach yourself to knit, it can be very difficult. And throughout the book, we see her sit down in a moment of calm and try it and fail. And later she finds a crochet hook, tries it, fails, and she really struggles with it. And then at the very end, she sees outside of her apartment complex, there's 3 women knitting. And they invite her to join her, and they're just like, we're not very good, but, it's fun. And this is when she gives it up completely, when she says she knows that she will never join them for it. She's given up on the possibility of a normal life. She is always going to be like this. And I will admit, reading it, there was a part of me that's like, you can eat people and knit.
Girl, you can have 2 hobbies.
And DeAngelis in her YouTube series says that for her, even though knitting is a solitary activity, she's always seen it as very much part of community because, you know, she makes things for her family. She's a part of crafting circles. And so for her, knitting is a sign of community.
Yeah, knitting is a sign of human connection.
Yes. And so for Marin to struggle and hold on to that, to finally give it up and decide it's never going to happen for me, is really important.
It's really important. It's very sad. The ending is sad. Marin does accept herself for what she is. But at the same time, it's her deciding to completely cut herself off from any hope of connecting with others.
Also in the book, Marin realizes that she's met other eaters, and specifically female eaters.
Mm-hmm.
And she even, it's very strongly hinted, suspected by Marin, whatever, that one of her housemates in her apartment is also an eater.
Mm-hmm.
But on both sides, there's no desire to connect. There's this sort of understanding that, like, we're probably gonna be alone.
Yeah, I'll let you have your feeding habits and hunting grounds, and I'll keep to mine.
Yeah.
Which, you know, the book includes one gay character who is so sad. He is so super sad and suicidal, and he ends up getting eaten anyway. And that's not like a bad thing. I mean, I think he's a fine character. But it is really interesting to me that, and I know that this is because DeAngelis is straight herself, but it is very interesting to me that going by what we were discussing earlier, the rule of Marin's feeding and the triggers and everything. Penny, her first victim, was a woman. She's the only woman that Marin ever eats.
Yeah.
She doesn't eat Mrs. Harper, right? Mrs. Harmon.
Yeah.
It's been a year since I read this book. Because Mrs. Harmon doesn't fit her criteria. And first of all, are there no gay women in Marin's life? Well, but then, second of all, it's just sort of interesting that if we go along with the idea that Penny did have this horrible, horrible desire for Marin that got her eaten, and good riddance. As she was a woman, it's interesting that Marin, as she grew older, only ever targets boys that have desire for her.
Yeah, only seeks out friendship with them, because she mentions sort of briefly that, like, well, she just never fit in with girls. And she says that, but every so often, you know, she'd be this loner, you know, another boy who wasn't popular, who was also kind of weird, would kind of latch onto her and would eventually, under some pretense, invite her to his house where, you know, their parents aren't. Again, very much like the, you know, teenager kind of sexuality of like, oh, well, why don't you help me with my homework? Oh, my parents aren't home. Oh
no, my door's closed.
Oh no, let me show you my Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Oh, the door's closed. But she just immediately dismisses any kind of female friendship. She doesn't seek it out. She doesn't try. There's absolutely nothing. And the only women around her age that we see are antagonistic to her. There's the college student that she bums a ride from, who ends up just leaving her in a Walmart parking lot, goes back on her word to drive her where she said. And then there's at the very end Sherry Ann, who is a popular girl who's antagonistic towards Marin because of her proximity to and perceived relationship with Lee. And it does kind of feel very like, again, gay women don't exist, but there's one gay man that's a very straight woman.
Yeah, it's a very straight woman. Versus in the movie, going back to the movie is gay. Which I love with all my heart. This movie is gay as fuck. This movie is so queer, it's stupid. It was directed by a gay man. I have no idea if the writer is LGBT. I know he's worked with Luca on other previous projects.
That writer also worked with Guadagnino on Suspiria, which also has very...
He worked with him before.
Right, but I think he worked with him on... Oh, no, he didn't. He did not do the screenplay for Call Me By Your Name. No. Suspiria also.
He's a horror writer, bro. Sticking to the genre.
Personal life on Wikipedia. There is a single sentence. Would you like me to read it?
Is it gay?
He is openly gay.
Hell yeah. We out here. He also worked on The Terror, I believe. Yeah. Also phenomenal. I mean, just great all around. Nothing but bangers. So, hugely gay, this movie. I mean, Lee has a tattoo, a little stick and poke. This is Adam, Eve, and Steve. So, you know, even excluding the whole cruising situation, which could have been hand waved away as, oh, he just was trying to eat.
He was hunting.
You know, he was hunting. Nah, this man is bisexual.
In the movie, the first victim that we see Marin attack is a woman.
It's a classmate of hers from high school, and they're having their own little sapphic sleepover moment, and Marin
starts, like, sniffing her, and Kim, which is...
very sensually.
The girl's name is, like,
into it. She is mad into it.
The shooting script specifies that, okay, Marin's giving her this attention that is clearly like attraction, and that Kim is enjoying it and she's used to this kind of attention.
Kim is mad into it, alright? She is ready.
Kim really thought they were gonna make out that night.
They were gonna have a moment. And instead, Marin bites her finger off. So, you live and learn. I hope that didn't turn off Kim from exploring her latent lesbianism. Lee and Marin in the movie, bye for bye.
Truly.
100%.
And even the way that when her dad ends the tape and is just like,
God.
I hope that, you know, one day you wake up, this God frees you from this. I hope, you know, there's this...
I hope you get better.
I hope you get better. And Marin says, I knew that's how it would end.
Just devastated. And she's listening to it with Lee, and Lee is telling her, no, he's wrong. Because she's saying, I wish I was better too. Like, I wish that I wasn't like this. And he's saying, no, don't. He's wrong. Don't say that. Very much a metaphor for queer kids of unaccepting parents and supporting one another in that.
Yeah.
Because Lee's family is also
openly
homophobic.
Timothée Chalamet is, I mean, he's clearly picked specifically for this role because he looks like, he's like one of the most...
He's a twink.
He's the most fuckable twinks.
That twink?
Yeah.
Obliterated.
He is at the end.
Closed casket.
But throughout the movie, like, he's wearing women's clothes.
Yeah,
I mean...
what's
really interesting is that he's wearing women's clothes. He has an earring. He has 2 earrings in his cartilage on one ear. And it goes back and forth which one's the gay ear. But the fact that he has
it. They're both very androgynous. It's not a question. It's a statement.
Yeah.
This is what this movie is about. And I love it. I ate that shit up. It was incredible.
And for Lee, his family that he has this very kind of strange relationship with, he has a younger sister named Kayla who he does very much love. But in her fit of anger, when he's about to leave, she realizes it and she confronts him and yells at him.
She's very upset.
Very upset.
She's feeling abandoned. I mean,
yes.
She feels abandoned every time that he leaves, and he knows that, but he keeps doing it anyway. And so she's very hurt. She's lashing out. She's a teenager in the 80s, in the Reagan 80s. The fact that they chose to set it then is well.
Yep.
Big statement. I mean, the book is set in the 90s, in the late 90s.
Yep. He's wearing women's clothes, and she says, and you look like a fucking faggot in that shirt.
Right.
Slams the door. The shooting script goes further, where Lee, after she says that, Lee says, I heard you the first 3 times you said it.
So we know that that's happened before. We know that she said that before. And it really just screams that Lee loves his family. He keeps going back to them. But he is very much a queer teenager. We don't know how old he is. I mean, I'm going to guess 20. He can't be.
I think it happened when 21. He left home when he was
in high school.
16 or 17. And Kayla says that was 4 years ago. So he's like 20.
So at most 20. Yeah. So basically a teenager. No offense to 20-year-olds. You're a teenager. Very much this queer teenager who loves his family, loves them, keeps going back to them, but he cannot be around them for anything more than small doses because they just don't accept him. And you can't thrive in that environment. You can't live in that.
Yeah.
And it sucks because he doesn't really have anywhere else to go. I mean, he's just kind of bumming around.
And you had an interesting thing when we watched through it again, saying that if he were to come out, like, Kayla does love him.
Kayla does love him.
So if he were to come out, it's kind of a question of, she probably would stop saying that, but she doesn't understand that she's making it harder for him.
She doesn't know the damage that she's actually doing. To her, that's just, it's a derogatory word. She is trying to hurt his feelings, but she doesn't know exactly how hurtful she's being. And the question is always there, you know, when you're a queer person with homophobic, transphobic family members who you love and who love you, the question is always there, if I come out, would they still love me? Would they change? Would they be accepting? And I like to think yes, because she does love him, and I'm a younger sibling. I always just kind of project onto younger siblings. We'll never know because Kayla dies.
Another difference from the book.
Yes, huge difference.
Kayla at least gets to live in the book.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of the idea of this being passed down through family, in the book, Kayla and Lee have different dads.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's never stated outright, but it's very strongly suggested that Lee ate his own dad. Because Lee has eaten a lot of his mom's abusive boyfriends throughout the
implication
years.
is that his dad was the eater.
Yes.
Because he's an eater.
Yes.
And the eating is passed down through a parent.
Yes. And so for this movie where Lee and their mom and dad were together, from Kayla's point of view, they had an abusive dad who there was a big confrontation and fight, and he just left after a confrontation with
After
Lee.
beating the shit out of Lee.
Yes, and also hitting her. So is the idea that, because Kayla is not an eater, only Lee is the idea that that's part of even the metaphor for queerness, where only one of us kind of got it? Why am I like this but not you?
Yeah.
Or is the implication that Kayla's just not
She's
a
not
child?
that man's child. I lean towards that. I kind of wish that they had gone into that a little further. I think it would have been interesting.
I lean more into, or even seeing it as a metaphor for addiction, where
Yes.
Lee has the addictive personality.
Because
Kayla
that's the other face of this film. It is so much a metaphor for addiction. The other eater that they come across, Jake, even states it outright to Lee. He says, I've seen people like you. You think you've got this under control, but you don't, because you're an addict. It's gonna come out. And I mean, truly, they did a great job with it. It's such a movie with so many different interpretations and messages, and all of them feel like they were done with intent.
And well done.
And well done. I mean, it's so well crafted. Visually, it's stunning. Every scene is a painting.
I mean, Luca Guadagnino, his directing is
Just
so
beautiful.
And even just the use of color, where there's a lot of, I would say almost like skin tone, like neutrals, like there's a lot of beiges and whites and browns, and
very warm
but then
film.
Contrasted with a bright blue.
Yeah, he films so much in the golden hour as well, and just masterful.
A lot of his shots are a little wider than you would expect.
Yeah.
So when he does the close-ups, you really take notice.
Yeah, and it just makes the story feel very expansive, even though it doesn't really take place over a long period of time.
No, and that's what makes it feel all the more tragic at the end when you realize, like, because it shows you, a little title card will come up and tell you what state they're in.
And which month.
And which month. It's only been, like, 3 months.
Yeah, it has not been a long time.
Like, Lee and Marin only got, like, 3 months together. Not even, because they split up for a little bit.
Yeah, and Lee and Marin's love story really just takes center stage in the film in a way that it doesn't in the book. The book is very much about family.
Yes.
And the movie does stuff with family, but it is a love story first and foremost. It is about finding the person that fits you, that matches you, that makes you feel like yourself. It is about finding self-acceptance through loving someone else.
Yes, and the scene outside of the mental hospital where Marin is freaking out. And
Marin has just
tells
confronted her mother, who checked herself in.
Yeah.
Her mother's alive. Her mother is the eater in the film. And her mother checked herself into a state hospital so that she couldn't hurt anybody else. She ate both of her hands so that she couldn't eat anybody else. And before she did that, she wrote Marin a letter explaining. And then she tried to eat Marin.
Because in her mind, like, it was almost a mercy.
Yes, it was a mercy kill. She was trying to do Marin a favor because she has had such a miserable existence, cutting herself off from love so that she wouldn't hurt the people that she loved. And she doesn't believe that people like them, that eaters, can find love or happiness. So for her, killing Marin is really the only happy ending that Marin will ever have.
Yeah. And she even says, I'm sorry for abandoning you and for what I also have to do now.
Right.
For what I did to you and what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
She's having a hard time and freaking out, and Lee kind of confronts her and is like, listen, I think that you've been shut off for so long, and now you're in the world seeing yourself through someone else, and it's freaking you out. And listen, it freaks me out too.
Yeah, she's saying it fucks him up too, because he feels like he's seeing himself through Marin, and he doesn't do that, per his own words. He doesn't sweat this shit out like she does.
what he does.
That's when they leave. Shortly after that, Marin
And especially
runs off while he's
That's a
asleep.
queer narrative.
It's a queer narrative. This whole film is a queer narrative. It's so, and to set it during Reagan America, with the AIDS epidemic coming on, the scene that didn't make it into the actual film involving HIV, where Lee talks about being forced to go to a revivalist meeting and people are asked to come up to be saved, and a man approaches and says that he has HIV and gets booed out of the tent. This movie is so purposeful.
And even when it comes to, like, one of the victims that Marin has a really hard time with is they go to a carnival, and she says she's hungry, so Lee finds and targets a man running a carnival game. And it's cruising. It is literally cruising. And you could tell if this was done, written and directed by a gay man.
It's 100%.
And Lee meets up with him after the carnival's closed. There's no one around. This guy, they're hooking up, and while hooking up, Lee slits his throat and digs in.
He may or may not have let him come first.
Up for debate. And it's only after they go to drive to his house to, take what money he has or whatever, that they realize that, oh, he had a family. He has a baby. And Lee says there's no car seat in his car. He wasn't wearing a red wedding ring. Like, we didn't know. Marin has a hard time with it.
Marin takes it so hard.
But Lee's just like, listen.
This is survival.
We didn't know. And especially knowing that from the point of view of it's cruising for Lee, it's, well, that was the risk for cruising. In the 80s, you know that's a threat.
Yeah, and literally, like, you can die doing this. The
script makes it even more explicit where he says, well, you lied about it going around like that, like he could have been killed for more than one reason. So I highly recommend reading the shooting script. It's even more of a meeting point between the book and the movie because David Kajganich really clearly was a big fan of the book, and he puts lots more nods. It's a little closer to the book in there, and just the reality of filming. Another difference between just the shooting script and the movie is that in the shooting script, once Lee and Marin meet up together, they have both completely accepted being predators, being eaters, and you see them actively hunting people.
They hunt together.
And they hunt together, and it goes into a longer kind of explanation of how they get the apartment in Ann Arbor, which is that they target and kill a transfer student who is very nice to them.
Yeah, tragic.
Yeah, and they kill her, and they don't have this remorse, and Lee offers up basically this woman, whose name was Harmony, her life to Marin, saying, hey, nobody's seen her, her tuition's paid off, this apartment's paid off for the semester, you could go to class and be her, we could just be people here.
Yeah.
And Marin sees it for what it is, as this gesture of love, and I really like that. I like that them kind of accepting it and trying to build a life together. But again, it's not necessary. When Marin shows back up and outside the ice cream store with a car, you know what's happened.
You know what's happened.
You know what's happened. The movie, I will say, I don't think the movie feels long.
No, it doesn't. I am a fan of short movies. I am a fan of stories that get to the point. I don't tend to love long, drawn-out films. This was a movie where each time I have watched it, it has felt like every moment is necessary, every moment is earned. It has a lot of long pastoral moments where it's going over the landscape and everything. It doesn't feel like a fast-paced story, and it reminds me of a little bit of Studio Ghibli.
You know?
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki, who has talked about how stories need breathing room for you to set aside the tension and just kind of have a moment, and this movie has a lot of those.
I think the specific instance I'm remembering of an interview where he claps his hand and he says you can't just have the sound of the clap, you also have to have the silence before and after. And that's the thing that gets me when people are just like talk about, oh well, after the hospital scene the movie really lags, and it's off. I want to be so mean to you right now.
It's unbelievable how anyone can have a bad word to say about this movie. I think if you are complaining about this film, you've got bad taste. Sorry. It's great. It's a great film. I understand taste is subjective. There are some films that I will agree to disagree on. This is not one of them. The fact that this film didn't do well commercially hurts my heart.
And the thing is the book did not
well critically. And the movie did well critically.
Yes. And just like the book was not a runaway bestseller, but it has very good reviews.
Yeah.
This movie was not a box office hit, but it has such great reviews.
It's fantastic.
And even trying to find it, you can't find it online.
Difficult.
And, well, no, I think it is on Amazon. But even trying to secure a physical copy,
yeah.
you have to hunt it down. It's like The Fall.
And it wasn't playing at a lot of theaters either. Nothing is as bad as The Fall.
No, The Fall.
When it comes to trying to find
The Fall is bad.
This movie. The Fall is truly such an... did I make this movie up? Because where is it? The soundtrack, incredible. Everything about this film, incredible. The soundtrack done by Trent Reznor, King.
Absolutely. It's just a good album to listen to just on its own.
Yeah. The one thing about the soundtrack, and I said this when I first watched it, I wish that they had put an Adia Victoria song on this soundtrack. I don't know if you've ever heard her. Every song that she's ever made would have fit with this movie. Truly tragic to me that she was not utilized.
Her name sounds very familiar. Is she the one that says, I took a knife?
Yes.
Yes, okay. That's the song of hers I've heard. Very good.
Very good. Yeah, she's great. Go look her up. Oh, Sully. Let's talk about movie Sully. Yes. Film Sully, very different from book Sully. Maybe the biggest difference between the two.
Yes.
Film Sully, honestly, is a tragic character to me. To me. I understand if people are like, no, fuck that guy. But to me, he is truly just so sad. I mean, fuck what he did, for sure. But he makes me so sad. He is such a weird, lonely old man. Just lonely. So lonely that it poisons you.
And the script specifies that as Marin kind of watches him, she thinks about how a life on your own can kind of twist you into weird
It can
ways.
twist you. It can make you rot. And truly, what does that mean for Marin?
Yeah.
If she's going to cut herself off, you know what I mean?
Yep.
This could be her future.
And in the script, after they kill Sully and her and Lee are just staring at each other in that aftermath, there's a moment where Lee realizes he's killing his father. He's always going to kill his father. And they look at each other and realize this could have been their future.
Mm-hmm.
It's
tragic. It's tragic. Sully is a tragic character to me. He is not Marin's grandfather in the film. He really does just kind of stumble upon her, and he connects with her, and you can tell that this is the first connection he has had with anyone in a very long time. And so he becomes obsessed with her. And again, I don't condone that.
But this is a film about loneliness.
But it is a film about loneliness as someone who is an outcast in society. Yeah. This movie lives and breathes queer allegory. If Sully is this extremely isolated gay man who has lived through the years where it was literally illegal to be gay, and that has also combined with the fact that he is an eater, what would that do to somebody? And so he's just tragic. He's a tragic character, and he does horrible things because of it.
And I think that it is really interesting to draw the parallels between Lee and Sully, and how when Marin leaves them both, Sully becomes obsessive. Sully
obsessive and hunts her down. Lee
repeatedly.
Yes, Lee let her go and waited for her to return to him, which she did. And that is 100% on purpose, a juxtaposition between the two of this is what actual love looks like versus just possession. Yeah. Film Sully fascinates me. He's one of the film villains I have found increasingly interesting in a very long time.
Again, to go back to the screenplay, the way the screenplay is, again, it feels very closer to the book, where Sully is a little more slick. Mm-hmm. He's more charismatic. And the way that Mark Rylance, the actor playing Sully, delivers those lines.
Oh, he did such a fantastic
he's so
job.
Halting and strange. And it is very funny to see, an interview with him, the actor, just normal.
Yeah, just being a guy. Yeah, in the film, he's so off-putting because he's just weird. But I think we've all known an old person that is weird.
And even, I think, a lot of us coming out of lockdown who were very isolated, you realize, I think I certainly went through this when I started going around, a lot of people again and getting into such a person-facing job, realizing that I've almost forgotten how to talk to people.
Yeah.
And for Sully, he's enamored with, I think, the idea of Marin.
100%. He doesn't know Marin.
No.
He doesn't know Marin, but for the first time in at least a long time, he feels this connection with somebody else, somebody that he can be honest around as an eater, someone that he can potentially show the ropes to and take under his wing.
And I think that's also why he's so disdainful of Lee, because she's a pretty young girl and Lee is a handsome young boy, and this idea of anger, of inadequacy.
Yeah.
You dumped me just for a younger model.
Yeah, they have all this youth, like, what can he show you that I can't? I know way more than him. I've been doing this way longer. And truly, I don't think that Sully had any sort of desire for Marin.
No.
Romantic / sexual desire, specifically. Yeah. I don't think he had that for Marin. I think he was obsessed with her, but more is just he wanted that companionship that he believed she represented.
And he even says when he her meets back up, she says, well, I'm a girl. And he goes, yeah, it'd be about my daughter's age if I had one. And Marin's like, is that what this is?
And he doesn't answer. But I think it was for him, like something like that, I think. And when he attacks her in Lee's apartment and she tells him me and Lee are together, because it does feel reminiscent of a rape scene, you know.
Very much.
He has pressed her down to the bed. He's on top of her. And Sully is clearly upset that she thinks that that's where this is going. Yeah. He says it's not about that.
That's not what he means by I have unfinished business.
Yeah. His anger stems from the lack of companionship.
Yeah. And again, to parallel with Lee was also very much a loner. He didn't want. Marin just kind of tagged along. And
but he had convinced himself that he wanted to be alone. Yes. I mean, he was very cynical about it.
Yes, and so him opening up to it, and love did kind of save him, even though Jake was taunting him. Like, I think it really did. And then for Sully to want that and be denied it.
Mm-hmm. It's such a film about how we need others to survive. Not just literally, but emotionally. You can't do it alone. Yeah. Even the other eater, Jake, why is he letting this weirdo fucking human cop tag around? Because he can't be on his own. Yeah. You go crazy.
The script is a lot more explicit. And it's also different. In the script, Jake
and Brad, very different.
Brad don't like each other.
They hate each other.
Like, they're just kind
of... This is a bitter married couple that fucking hate each other.
And I feel like there's this sense of obligation where Brad's like, well, I can't just drop him because he is a cop. He could turn me in. And Jake being like, well, I need him to kind of show me the ropes because I don't have this inherent thing with me. And it's more explicit because in the movie, there's flashback where you can clearly see Lee killing Jake, the groupie. But in
Brad's the groupie. I mean, they both got
Brad the groupie.
Like boring ass names. It's fine.
What were we saying about slashers?
Yeah, truly.
They have it. Okay, the groupie. And in the script, there's a longer moment where Lee confronts him and asks, "Oh, where's Jake? Where's Jake? Did you eat him?" And then attacks him. In here, we don't see that, but we also don't see Jake. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's kind of implied that they didn't just go their separate ways.
Right. But again, if they hated each other that much, why are they hanging out? You know what I mean? Because they would go crazy if they're alone. That's really what it is. I mean, loneliness kills. I guess in that way, the movie is very different from the book, in that the book ends sort of on a happy note, in that Marin accepts herself, but part of accepting herself is isolating herself, which to me is very tragic, but it's not really portrayed that way.
No.
Versus the movie, which is very explicit in the fact that doing this on your own is not gonna lead you down a good road.
No. And at the end of the movie, you see the apartment clean after the fight, which means that...
Oh yeah, we didn't discuss the fight. So they kill Sully together, Lee and Marin. Very romantic. And in the scuffle, Sully stabs Lee.
In the lung.
In the lung. Lee's dying. Marin says they gotta go to a hospital so they can save him. Lee knows he's a goner and just begs her to eat him. And at first she says no, she's denying it, she's crying. But he is convincing. And mid-kiss, she starts eating him, starting with the mouth, bro. And then she goes down. And it doesn't show her eating him, bones and all. But I like to think that she ate him, bones and all.
Because that's what Jake says. In the movie, there's something
It's different. Like a rite of passage.
Yes, to eat someone, bones and all, the whole thing. And he says, it's like your first time. There's before bones and all, and then there's after. And I think that it's an act of love. And like...
He wants to feed her. her.
Right, in a way of, even if I can't live with you, I can
be
die
with you. I can be with you. I can be in you. You can carry me on.
Yes. And we don't see Marin after that cleaning up or anything, but we see the apartment that's been scrubbed clean and it's emptied. Similar to how in the beginning, her dad talking about how after she would do something, he would have to clean it and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the final shot that's so tragic where
it's a flashback to her and Lee on the hill.
Right.
And she's holding him. Devastating. Oh my God, Lucy.
She has opinions.
Lucy, we're having a moment. Oh my God. So that was the movie and the book.
Again, highly recommend. We love it.
The movie's incredible. Truly fantastic. No notes beyond the ones that I already said.
I mean, nothing to improve. Perfect.
Well, they could have had an Adieu Victoria song.
You know, if I were to pick one song, I haven't listened to a lot of that artist, but I really do think that, like Real People Do by Hozier, really fits the slow theme.
There is a scene, it is my favorite moment in the film, and Lee and Marin are discussing their future plans.
They're back together.
They're back together.
Themselves.
The truck's not doing so hot, the truck that they've been gallivanting around in. And Marin says, let's just drive until the truck gives out and then stop there and be people for a while.
We'll get jobs. We'll do things. And Lee says, you want to be people? Let's be people.
What are your favorite, besides Bones and All, what are your favorite
I did put down Bones
romantic horror stories?
Top of the list has to be Candyman.
For sure.
Classic. I feel like when it comes to romance, and especially in horror, when we talk about loneliness, I think the opposite end of that is obsession. And this idea that you want to be wanted and obsessed over, and the appeal of someone obsessing over you, even if you know it's not good, because there's the human need to be wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And Candyman, Tony Todd, the Be My Victim scene.
I mean, his voice alone.
Yes, absolutely. No notes. As far as another movie goes, Mandy. One
of
my favorites.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Mandy's incredible.
God, this revenge. And you run into the trope of, the woman died so the man could go on a revenge field. But she suffuses the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, it constantly cuts back to
her. I think it would be easy to look at Mandy and immediately say, oh, it's a fridge trope.
Yeah.
But unless you've watched the film, you really don't get how it kind of subverts that.
Yeah.
Mandy haunts this film.
Mm-hmm. As far as books goes, My Best Friend's Exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
And just fuck the movie, but the book just... Absolutely. And I think, and along with that vein of My Best Friend's Exorcism, you have Jennifer's Body, you have Fear Street, all really good romances. Another one that I have down is 28 Days Later.
Interesting.
And I know that it's not mainly a romance, but I think the relationship between the two.
I mean, I like for sure.
And in that film where, when you have the moment towards the end where he comes to their rescue, I think it does a very good job of this is not a helpless woman, but there are some situations in which you're not going to fight your way out of.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. Another one I have as far as books goes is The Hellbound Heart. Although that one...
What?
I'm going to be... Although that one, I made another list about, more obsession than love stories.
Yeah, I would not consider that a love story at all.
I should have saved that one. X, I kind of like, between the old people.
Sure.
X specifically, not Pearl.
Yeah.
Where all of these kills are a fucked up...
Love letter.
Yeah. Bram Stoker's Dracula. That feels like capital R romantic. Similar
Gothic romantic.
To Candyman, the I have crossed oceans of time to find you. I tell Tierney that the hard mode of this list is do this without doing any vampire media.
Leaned fully into the vampire thing. I'm sorry. The inherent romanticism of vampires cannot be overstated.
The fact that vampire stories are seductions. And along with that, I did put down Interview with the Vampire. Specifically the Brad Pitt and the Tom Cruise. I mean, all versions of it. I have not seen the show yet. I do mean to.
Got to.
But it's so clearly that movie is this is a toxic failing marriage where like even
I'm gonna baby trap this man.
Even my marriage is failing, we're gonna baby trap him. Like even at the very end when Lestat comes back, he still won't shut up about his ex.
Yeah.
He still won't shut up. He's still so obsessed with him. And I think that's just great.
So you said a couple of mine. I put Thirst from 2009. It's a Korean film. Very good. It's vampires. I mean, you know.
I would assume from the title.
The Only Lovers Left Alive. Also vampires.
I did consider that one.
A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Also vampires. I also put Thirst. It's the same title, but it's from 2018. It's an Icelandic vampire movie. Okay, so here's my thing. It's not romantic romance. But it feels very much kind of like a lavender marriage between this gay vampire and he befriends this sex worker who they become besties after he saves her. And she's an addict and there's a lot of stuff. But they kind of save each other. And it's very nice. It's nice. It's a fun movie. It's a fun time. And then I put Alien versus Predator. Hear me out.
I actually browsed...
Hear me out!
I browsed Reddit for some ideas because on Tierney...
Was this on there?
It was, and it was someone who said, listen,
it should have been. It should have been. It should be... If you have not seen Alien versus Predator, remove all preconceived notions from your mind. It is such a good film. It has one of the first Black final girls, Alexa Woods. She's a fucking badass. And she and that Predator, listen, I was like, I don't know, young. I was like 12, 13. I didn't know about fan fiction yet. If I had, I would have been on that Alien versus Predator, fanfiction.net.
Every single,
Alexa and the Predator, get me there.
Every single behind-the-scenes photo of them looks like...
their dates to prom.
Yeah, or like their anniversary picture or their honeymoon picture.
And it's because they are. And then I put honorable mentions because I'm like this. Jennifer's Body, come on. Fear Street, Let the Right One In, the original Swedish film. Honestly...
I think it would have been on my list if I'd seen
so
it.
good. This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone.
I wouldn't have counted that as horror.
It's horror to me, bitch. It's horror. I've talked about this before. I cast a very wide net over what I consider horror because I think most people are way too minimizing with how they decide something is horror or not. I think that This Is How You Lose the Time War is horror in the way that the first Terminator film is horror. My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Obviously, and The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Oh, very good one.
Yes.
I didn't even consider that one.
So go off on your tangent. Go ahead.
The thing I wanted to say is that when I thought about it's like the opposite of romance. But like, number one...
This doesn't fit the criteria at all, but listen.
But it sparked my imagination. Number one was the Hellbound Heart, because like the idea... Because again, I think with horror and romance, you're going to veer into obsession.
Sure.
And the Hellbound Heart is being about obsession and desire. And I put Ginger Snaps with an asterisk.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. No.
Because,
that's fair.
And one part of it that I really respected about the movie that I wasn't expecting them is that, like, at the end, they fully go into, like, no, these girls are incestuous. Like, this is not healthy. And it lends more emotional balance to when the younger sister finally breaks free.
Yeah. No, I think that's 100% fair.
So I don't want to have an asterisk because it's not romance. Like,
it is, kind of.
It is, but it's with the asterisk of, like, you know, it's not like when I think of, like, Candyman. Like...
Yeah. I mean, I put Thirst 2018, which they're not into each other at all. But listen, there's something inherently lovely about, to me, what is essentially that kind of lavender marriage dynamic.
Yeah.
And that's so present in that. And I love it. That's a love story. It doesn't need to be sexual. That said, we do have a game that I will force upon you. And it's going to be very similar to our Just Plain Scary game.
Okay.
No red flags. Just the hello. So in this jar, we have some romantic characters from horror.
Okay.
And we're each going to do a couple of rounds of picking two of them. And the other person has to guess which one we would each choose.
Okay.
Between the two. Okay? Simple. If we get it wrong, we're no longer friends. It's fine.
The podcast is over.
The podcast is over. We made it 3 episodes.
Better than most.
Okay. So go ahead.
How many should I pick?
2.
First one is Ganja of Ganja and Hess. I have not seen Ganja and Hess.
Oh, no! I thought you had.
I hadn't. It's been on the list forever.
Oh, no.
Should I pick another one that I do know?
Sure.
All right. And then I have Eric Draven from The Crow, which I have.
Okay, well, we'll take ganja out for a minute while you pick it. If you pick
I
Hess,
know.
though, I'm going to
The
laugh.
thing is, I know that I would love ganja and Hess. I just haven't sat down.
You really would.
Marin, Bones and All.
Okay, so you've got Eric Draven from The Crow and Marin from Bones and All. Fuck. These are both good choices. I'm going to say you would pick Eric.
I would.
Yeah. I mean, the man's loyal.
I think and also the difference is I'm older now. Where,
Yeah.
You know.
Marin's pretty young.
She is, and not only that, but like, not just the age itself of it, but like at such different stages.
Yeah.
I would see her as a little sister.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
for sure.
see her as a potential partner.
I think that makes sense.
Eric Draven, girl.
Listen, Eric Draven.
Let's burn the world down
I
together,
mean,
baby.
100%. Honestly, I should have included The Crow and Ganja and Hess in my honorable mentions. Truly romantic, both of those. So I have picked Candyman, the Tony Todd version.
Okay. We just assume it's a dyke version of
Yeah,
these?
yeah, you know, it's all of these are transcending sexualities. And then Dracula of any Dracula media. Although I will say, for my purposes, I think the most romantic iteration of Dracula is the one from Castlevania, which you have not seen.
I've seen the first season of Castlevania.
Oh, okay. Well, the first season is the only one where he's bearable.
Yeah.
But so...
Okay.
So first season of Castlevania Dracula versus Tony Todd Candyman.
I think I'm going to go with Dracula.
No.
No.
Hell no, it's Tony Todd. Okay, friendship over.
All right, cut the cameras.
Oh my god, it's Tony Todd. That's not even a competition.
I think I wasn't necessarily thinking Dracula. I was thinking vampires in general.
I do love a good vampire. But no, hell no. I mean, Dracula in Castlevania Season 1 is the most romantic version of that character to me, but truly, I am not a Dracula fan. I don't enjoy him. I think he is kind of a piss baby.
Across iterations.
So, yeah.
I was thinking vampires in general, and that was my mistake.
It's specified. That was a specific-ass vampire. There's several vampires in this jar.
I think I should have given you a criteria of you can't include vampires. The Lost Boys was one that came up a lot.
Ooh.
Jennifer Check from Jennifer's Body and Red from Mandy. This is going to be so easy for you.
You got Red, baby.
Yep.
You're going for Red. You want that Nick Cage.
I'm getting like all the like revenge.
Yes, you are. Like the loyal avenging boyfriends. Okay. I've got Ganja from Ganja and Hess and a Hess from Ganja and Hess.
I have.
You have not seen this movie.
Girl.
I know. Let me just make this easier for you. Ganja is the woman. Hess is the man.
Flip a coin. Ganja.
It's Ganja.
Like
That's my bad. I thought we had talked about Ganja and Hess. I thought you'd seen it.
No, you can't. I kept saying like, oh, I really want to see it, and then you were just like, you should, and that was us talking about it.
Wow.
Lee from Bones and All. I want that to obliterate the girl. A girl walks home alone at night.
I think you're going with the girl.
Yes. And again, same thing with the reasons for Marin. That Lee is he's younger, like, early 20s is
less sure of himself.
Yes, and like we're just at different points. And like the girl, like,
come on.
love a confident
yes.
woman. Her stealing this little kid's skateboard.
She's great.
And I love this scene where like it looks like she's vampiric floating along.
Yes.
And she's just on a skateboard.
It's what a good movie. So that's been our Valentine's episode of The First Ones to Die.
Yep.
Very romantic. Do you feel romance?
Oh, absolutely.
I feel romance with this drink that you made me.
We'll post the recipes for them, but going along with themed drinks, Tierney is drinking a Dirty Shirley.
That I poured a Celsius into. But I drank most of it first because it did taste bomb.
Because Tierney's the type of person who doesn't like to taste alcohol, and I
don't mind the taste of alcohol. I just don't want to drink it straight anymore. I am at the point in my life where I can afford cocktails.
And I picked it specifically because it's red, it looks like blood, and I am drinking a Negroni because
horrible drink.
It looks like blood, and as Marin describes in the book what it's like, she calls it the bad taste, and that's a Negroni,
it's a bad taste.
Baby.
That's a Negroni.
I do enjoy it.
First of all, I don't watch the Game of Thrones too nonsense. But I had to see so many clips of that dyke talking about a Negroni. And everyone who has never even heard of one romanticizing Negronis and being like, oh, I want a Negroni. No, you don't. No, you don't. It's a bad drink.
For anyone curious, the difference between a Negroni and a Negroni Spagliato, which is what that actor was saying, is you replace the gin with Prosecco. And it's still very bitter.
It's bad. It's bad. Why would you do that to yourself? It's like the people that eat black licorice. Why? Why would you ruin sugar? Anyway, we have a Valentine's episode of Just Plain Scary.
Ooh.
And that's going to be Red Eye, which I've never seen. Neither of us have ever seen, but I've heard good things. I don't think you've heard anything.
No.
Yeah.
I think I always mix it up with Blood Red Sky, which I have seen.
It's a different film, but still on a plane. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to the lovers, the haters, the obsessives.
Everyone in between, baby.
No, fuck you. Get an obsession. Live a little.
Get a hobby.